on Friday.
Now there's that one.
There's always the go-to meeting, that's the backup, but not ideal.
Okay, look, looks like it's working.
We're not getting any, oh, there it goes. Huh, alright. Make sure, yeah, make sure you start the go-to meetings, one thing I would say, but I saw you over there on Thursday,
I know,
it
you
was
could see
working,
it. It
yeah.
was- looked exactly like it did.
Yeah, it was working, let me, cause I usually get a YouTube alert, and I'm not getting one.
Yeah, and it won't be there. Is this part of what you checked on Friday?
It worked,
Okay.
I did it, I took it down, but for about 20 minutes,
It was there?
there was me walking around the city council room.
That's what we wanna see.
It is not shut, it's,
Here, I mean, it's right there.
yeah, I
I see
don't,
it. I mean, are we logged in someplace else?
I don't think so.
Wouldn't make any sense.
Can you save this when you're done? It's not showing up.
It showed up on Friday?
Yeah, it showed up on Friday, worked just fine. On that YouTube stream, can you save it? Like download it, like once you're done with the stream?
No, it automatically uploads it.
Like,
If it's connected, there's no like saving.
it's so weird. Yeah, it's not showing up. It worked just, I don't have it anymore, but I checked it on Friday.
Country Village Townhomes, they're off of Lexington.
Yeah, it's not showing up.
Yeah.
Back on the east side?
Okay.
The city of Boyle, Scott. Bathroom, bathroom.
Oh, that's really.
I don't know, I called, left Matt, last night emailed Matt, I haven't heard back, I don't know if he's out of town, he said his contact was good.
Good, man. That's one for you.
Yes, he's down here.
It's streaming somewhere.
It's locked. I don't know. I'll try, I'll play with it. Maybe you're not clicking a button or something. I'll think about it tomorrow. It was working just fine on Friday.
Mike, good?
Yes, sir, we are good. Yep, thank you.
As it is 6 o'clock, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Manson,
Present.
Templin,
Here.
Lane,
Here.
Huggins,
Here.
Milburn,
Here.
Maddock,
Here.
Schultz.
Here.
All are present.
Item 3 on our agenda is called general business. Approved planning commission agenda. You've all had a chance to see the agenda. Any changes or corrections you'd like to make to it?
Make a motion, we approve the planning commission agenda as written.
Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Seeing none, agenda is approved. Item 3B, approve the minutes of the planning commission meeting held on August 22nd, 2023. Any changes or corrections you'd like in the minutes?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded for approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Item 3C, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Anyone have anything on the agenda tonight that we have conflict of interest on?
Chairman, I'll have to excuse myself from item 7A.
7A. Okay. Anyone else? Thank you. Item 3D, disclosure of outside communications regarding commission business. I'll start. I got a call from Dorothy, or from Boots. You all have seen her memo, her email, but I did receive a call from her. Anybody else? This time, item 4, call of the public. Members of the public who wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on the agenda may do so at this time. Any presentation is for information purposes only. No action will be taken. There's a 4-minute time limit. Anyone like to address the planning commission? No one online, I assume?
No one online.
We will close the call of the public. Item 5A, public hearing to consider request to rezone property at 32550 Lexington Avenue from RH to R3.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have before you is a request to rezone a tract from RH at 32550 Lexington Avenue. It's the former DeSoto Inn to R3. The applicant, Brenda Cassidy, is here in the audience tonight. And if you have questions for her, she's certainly available to answer any of those. I've had a couple of meetings in the office with her and gone through the process for rezoning. I'll go ahead and go through the staff report and then open up to any questions or comments that you may have. As you can see, as we all know where the former DeSoto Inn is, the applicant is planning to renovate and remodel and turn it into apartments. And to do so would need to have a rezoning. As I understand it, the DeSoto Inn has ceased operations as a hotel, or pardon me, a motel. So this is the process they're going. There is a contract for this property, and as part of the contingent on the sale of the property is to get the correct zoning in place for this location. I did get a couple calls from nearby property owners about the rezoning, most wanting to know what the potential use is. Apparently they've had some issues with tenants, if you will, of the DeSoto Inn. It's apparently there's been some run-ins with the sheriff and things like that. So they're curious about what this was all about. So that was kind of the gist of those phone calls that I'd received about this property. As I had stated, the property is currently zoned RH, residential historic, which is, we've talked about this many times, is for single family and duplex units. Clearly DeSoto Inn does not fall within that category as a land use. And the applicant has indicated that they do want to turn this into multifamily, and to do so would require rezoning to R3. Another thing that we talked with the applicant about is bringing it up to 2018 building codes. This building was built quite some time ago. Not a whole lot has happened to it in that series of time, and so there will be a significant amount of remodeling that'll go into this project. Also, there'll be a site plan that does need to be approved by the Planning Commission as well. So there will be some issues that we're going to have to take care of as far as make sure there's adequate number of parking spaces, things like that, landscaping. Obviously, there's an old sign and some things like that that need to be removed, and some architectural features that'll need to be included as well. As you can see, the area zoning in this whole area is RH. The tract to the north is actually a single-family resident. The tract to the west are mobile homes, and the tract to the east and the sort of northeast is apartments. And you can see, I'm sorry, I kind of got these out of order, what I usually have, Mike, but the aerial photo shows that. To the south is commercial uses. Used to be the former grocery store in DeSoto many years ago. Going through the zoning compatibility factors, character of the neighborhood, as I mentioned, it's primary mobile homes, apartments with one single-family residence adjacent to the north. South is commercial. It is consistent with the uses in the neighborhood. Compatibility of the proposed zoning use is permitted. The proposed zoning is more closely aligned with the surrounding land use. One thing I also wanted to point out is the DeSoto Inn is a non-conforming use in the RH district, so bringing this into compliance with the correct zoning certainly is a positive factor. Suitability of the uses in which the property has been restricted under its existing zoning has not been restricted under its existing zoning, as it is a non-conforming, existing non-conforming use. However, to do all the things that the applicant wants to do would require whole series of building permits and site plan, all those things, and therefore needs to be rezoned to an appropriate category. As I said, the motel ceased operations. It's now unused, providing renovations and bringing additional tenants into the community would certainly increase tax base and also turn a bit of a rundown building into something a little bit more suitable for the type of development that DeSoto's been looking for and wanting in the recent years. The extent which there's a need in the community for this use, we have talked about at length in many planning commission meetings, but also at staff level about to increase different housing options. As I understand, when talking with the applicant, senior housing is the desired sort of target market. There are no steps. Auto parking will be adjacent to each of the unit's front door. There'll be efficiency apartments, and there will be some one-bedroom uses as well in this area or in the renovation process. The availability of required utilities, the subject property is in an area with full city services to utilities and infrastructures. No change in utility services contemplated. Public service accommodations really will see no change. In fact, it could be improved if there's fewer calls to the sheriff's department out of this location. The extent to which the proposed zoning would adversely affect the capacity or safety of the portion of the street network. I don't see any issues with the street network with this proposed zoning change. All parking would be required to be on site, so no change is anticipated in this area. Environmental impacts, once again, the footprint of the buildings themselves would not be changed. Don't think that there would be any kind of environmental impacts or environmental harms based on this rezoning. And then ultimately the economic impact, I think would be a benefit to the city, as there would certainly be construction dollars created in the city. Also, sales tax from those production dollars, construction workers, and then additionally, ultimately, there would be consistent tenants in the building that would also be purchasing goods and services from the city of DeSoto. Extent to which the zoning amendment may detrimentally affect nearby property. As I said, if the building were brought up to code with the 2018 building code and a site plan is approved, I do see it as a positive and a benefit to the area. I don't see that there will be any gain to the adjacent neighborhoods by denying this rezoning request. And finally, consistency with the comprehensive plan and utility plans. The area is consistent with the future land use plan. It does show it as a mixed use area. The area to the south on Lexington is shown as continued commercial developments. We feel like that's a positive recommendation or review of the category, and it is staff's opinion that the applicant has met the criteria for granting the rezoning request to R3, and staff recommends approval of the rezoning request. So this time I will stand for any questions that you may have.
Brad, do we know how many, I know we don't have a site plan, but do we know what the intent is to how many dwellings we're planning on cutting this up into?
I believe there's 13 units, is that correct?
13.
Okay. And, sorry, follow-up question. Last commission meeting, we had a request to zone from 3 to RH, and my understanding is one of the primary differences why we did that the last time is because the setbacks were a little bit more flexible, and that's not the case here. But I was just looking at our R3 requirements. It says dwelling shall have a maximum density of 18 dwellings per acre. So I don't know if, since this is 0.6 acres and we're talking about 13 dwellings, if that's okay or if it's not okay. And I don't know if staff's looked at that under item 4C here under the R3 regulations.
Yeah, well, we changed that to 24 units per acre. I'm not sure if that's, anyway, but regardless, the 13 units, they're going to be single tenants in each unit, and it's a little over half acre. So even if the 18, you do the math, and it'll be just under that amount. So it'll work out.
Well, it does clearly say 18 with the published reg, so we've got maybe old regs that are still out there, maybe we ought to update that. I don't
Yeah,
know.
we'll check that.
But you believe it's 24 under what we most recently revised?
Yeah, we revised that recently.
Okay, because I was thinking of that issue too.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay, you bet.
So what did you say the future land use was again? Was it mixed use?
It's mixed use in that area, and actually, I mean, that's what that area is actually right now. Now, the buildings to the right look very similar in their nature, but they are used already as apartments. So that's also a non-conforming use. Mobile home park is also a bit of a non-conforming use as well, so it's kind of but it is primarily an apartment type area. The areas farther to the east are apartment units. So the only single family dwelling is the one straight to the north of this location.
Any other questions for Brad? Thank you. I see the applicant's here. Do you have any questions for the applicant? Okay. The matter is a public hearing, so I'll, at this time, invite the public, if they have any comment on this application, to approach the podium, give us your name and address. I assume we still have no one online.
No one online.
As there does not appear to be anyone to comment on this in public comment, I'll close the public hearing, and the matters then before the planning commission. Any discussion?
I've read through staff's report, and I'm in alignment with staff's professional opinion. Like I heard everybody else has to say on the commission, I would generally be for recommending approval.
Assuming we fix the published zoning regulations, I think it's fine.
Makes sense to me.
I don't see any issue, at least it gets it to the correct zoning.
Should we entertain a motion?
I will make a motion that the rezoning request is recommended to approval for the city council to be rezoned to R3. Do we need to put a stipulation in about the update on the code?
No, they'll take the risk of that if they got bad advice from the city.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Manson,
Yes.
Milburn,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Timplin,
Yes,
Huggins,
Yes.
Lane.
Yes.
Motion carries.
thank you for coming.
Can I leave now or do I need to stay?
You are free to go.
I have to stay.
No, you can go.
Thank you.
Moving now to item 5B, a public hearing to request or to consider a text amendment allowing emergency facilities in the M1 zoning district.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did bring this topic before the Planning Commission as an informational discussion item to make allowances for public safety uses in the M1 Light Industrial District. The reason this came up was because there's going to be a fire station constructed out at the Astra development, and sure enough, a check of our criteria didn't allow public safety facilities in the M1 zoning district. There's the proposed location for the fire station, and so that required us to go through the process of public hearing, text amendment to allow for the construction of the fire station in this area. One of the differences between the staff report this time and from last time, I did include all the items in the 922 district, which is what would be allowed in this area. I also wanted to point out that the way our code is set up, the 922-140 correctional institutions is only allowed in the OI by special use permit. So while it is considered a 922 use, because of our code already showing it as a special use permit in the OI, it has to have, well, it has to go through that separate process, and it'll only be allowed in the office industrial zoning district. So I do have all the items as far as that would be allowed in here, which would be, it would include potentially courts, police protection, legal counsel, parole offices and probation offices, fire protections, and then other justice and safety activities, which could include emergency management practices, government preparedness for disasters, things along those lines themselves. You do have the leeway to choose, I mean, to narrow this. If you just want it to be only fire station, you could take that recommendation or choose to recommend that to the city council. But I do feel like, based on the things that might be happening in the future in that area, it'd probably good to leave that a fairly broad category, because it might be a point where we do have a sheriff's station or something along those lines, emergency preparedness out on the Sunflower site. So I do feel like it would be good to leave that a fairly broad category and allow these types of uses to happen in the M1 district. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Any questions for staff? As this is a matter for public hearing, I'll take this opportunity to invite members of the public who'd like to be heard on this subject to approach the podium, give us your name and address. And again, no one online?
Correct.
As no one is clamoring to the podium, I will close the public hearing. Matters before the Planning Commission. Any discussion?
To me, it makes sense to have public safety stuff there.
I think so.
I think it makes good sense.
No issues here.
As long as it reads what it says here about the correctional institutions, then I'm fine with that.
Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the stated uses to include the M1 light industrial, to be included in the light industrial M1 zoning district.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Manson,
Yes.
Milburn,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes?
Huggins,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. We have no old business on the agenda tonight, so we'll move to new business, item 7A, and Commissioner Littlemore will excuse himself.
So noted.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, consider a site plan for the Rio Apartments, formerly City Street Shop location.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Milburn Civil Engineering, along with Adams Architecture, has submitted a site plan on behalf of Justin Baker to construct 3 multifamily buildings at 8180 Shawnee Streets, the former street shop and former water plant. Going through the process of the site plan, we did approve the rezoning a couple months ago, and as this is the next step in the process before building permits can be issued, the applicant needs to submit a site plan, and there are 3 buildings associated with this site plan. A single 2-story building and then 2 3-story buildings with associated parking. As you can recall, this site is actually a rather tough site to build on. It's sloping from south to north, and it is the site of the former street shop and also water treatment area, and has been vacant for 3 or 4 years now since the street shop moved to Lexington Avenue. We had several discussions with the applicant about ADA accessible, since these have rooftop amenities, which is kind of a nice feature for this area. I want to make sure that the ADA requirements were met as far as elevators. We did ask that changes were made to allow for the ADA accessibility all the way to the top to where the apartment part of the rooftop sort of garden area, if you will, is, and that has been accommodated in Building 3. And also the parking underneath Building 3 will have 2 ADA stalls underneath. So if there's any ADA accessible tenants or tenants along those lines, they will have also additional parking underneath the building for their use to take them up to their apartment and ultimately up to the rooftop amenity. There are 59 apartments in total. There'll be 1 bedroom, 1 bath units, and also 2 bedroom, 2 bath units. There are 89 parking stalls by required, or that are required. There's 93 stalls provided. As I'd mentioned, there's 4 ADA accessible parking locations. 2 of them, as I mentioned, are under Building 3. The other 2 are in the surface lots between the 2 buildings. There'll be community dumpsters provided between the buildings, which will have to match the architecture of the building. Landscape plan is included. It does meet our requirements. Also wanted to point out there's a landscape buffer per DeSoto City Code on the most southern building on the site plan. That does provide for the adequate buffer between in this case, a single-family residence. Photometric plan was provided, which meets our standards. The lighting is typical to residential standards. The light fixtures will be shielded and directed downward. No additional stormwater detention is needed as site drains directly to the floodplain, and don't see any downstream impacts are anticipated by this project. There are no public improvements on the site. It will all be privately installed force main, and then the applicant will do all the extensions for the water line hookups. Right now, because it was the former water plant, there are adequate water lines into the site that will be, so there is a short section that actually is going to be City of DeSoto, but once again, once it hits the meter, that's all on the applicant to take care of as far as installation and maintenance thereof. There is a sidewalk that'll be on the east side of the parking area, and there'll be ADA ramps from each of those parking areas. That's the surface lots that are in between buildings. Then also there will be a ADA ramp and a crosswalk on 82nd Street and Shawnee. As far as the architectural standards, we have had a few calls on this one, actually 1 call by and large from our former esteemed court clerk, Boots Linden. Boots has called me, and I've talked to her a couple times on this issue, and I did relay an email from her to all the planning commission members, and she is not in favor of the flat roofs and doesn't particularly like the colors of the building. However, upon review of our city code, the building does meet all the requirements that we do have. It has varying depths of buildings. It has the windows in the right location. The colors do vary, and so it does meet the criteria within the code. Now, we do have a fairly broad code, but as you recall, we changed a lot of those requirements because we did want to give the designers, the architects, flexibility and not say, you have to do this and you have to do that. And in the past, as these documents, and not just in DeSoto, but our neighboring communities in Johnson County and Douglas County for that matter, have made changes to allow for flexibility. We do still have a requirement for some stonework and some features that make the building dressier, if it's so to speak. But the complaint basically by Boots is that it's more of a too modern of an area of a design for this area, and it doesn't really fit the nature of old DeSoto. However, right now we have an old street shop with some old buildings and a very old concrete structure that used to be a water tower in this location. And while we can debate the merits of the architectural features, staff's opinion, it meets the code, and it is certainly will be an improvement over what's in that location at this point. As far as signage, no signage has been requested for this location. As I mentioned, the landscaping plan is contained on sheet L1. It does meet our requirements for site plan development, and we will have an issue with some easements and lot lines to get that sidewalk on the east side of the building. The city does own a very narrow strip on the east side that we'll have to the applicant will have to make a request to the city council to vacate that location to get about 5 feet of land to help with some grading requirements to allow for the sidewalk to be installed in that area. So with all the discussion and review of this, the Rio Apartments, staff is in favor of the site plan as presented with the condition about the trash dumpster needing to conform to the consistent use of material on the apartment building complex themselves. So with that, I will stand for any questions tonight. As I mentioned, the applicant is in the audience. Dustin is here, and also Lance Adams with Adams Architecture is here, and representatives from Milburn Engineering are here as well. But not Justin, he's in the back row.
Questions for Brad?
Brad, I see there's a 16-foot alley on the west side also.
I'm not sure the width, it doesn't seem like, I think it's only 10 feet, but that, yeah, you can kind of see it there, that gray area, and that's what's, believe it's 10 feet, that's City of DeSoto property.
He's talking on the west side.
Oh, pardon me.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a platted alley, but there's never been a physical alley there except that the last two lots on Wea Street, the two lots north of 82nd, do take access from what would be that alley. You can see here in the area, you can see that.
Yeah.
But north of that access, there's never been any physical alley there. It's just flat.
So who's responsible for that alley? Is that a city responsibility?
Yes. Responsibility for what? Maintenance? We've never done any maintenance activities back there at all. It's most of it's pretty steep and heavily wooded, so it's just been left in its natural state. I think adjacent homeowners have made use of portions of the alley, but we've never done any mowing or maintenance back there, to my knowledge.
I just don't know if the city wants that alley or,
Yeah, it's a good question to ask. There, at one time, we had a request from the owner of the property on the north. I don't know if it's the same owner, but it's been decades, to vacate that alley, and decided not to at that time. But we don't have a current plan to do anything with that.
That single-family residence in box number 8 there, that will stay there.
Yes, correct. And that's what's triggered that need for that landscape buffer and some of the additional landscaping on that property line.
I personally like the idea of having flat roofs so that people can go up and have some area to have a little recreation up there. However, it's a little too institutional looking for me. I would like to see, even though it was a plant before, this is our opportunity to maybe dress it up a little bit, so I just, that's my comments. Everything else looks good, I'm pleased with it, but I just, except for the outside, the exterior just, that looks like a prison to me. I just don't like it. Sorry.
The term I was using, it kind of looked antiseptic to me.
Yeah.
It, you know, I too like the rooftop amenities, but the building, to me, it was a water plant, but now's our opportunity to get it to blend in a little bit better with the neighborhood.
On the aesthetic point, so if you look at the south elevation, that's what you're gonna see from the street primarily. The south and then the west elevations. The north elevations, are only gonna see that if you're in the park. So I am a little concerned about the extent to which there is essentially flat wall. It takes up so much of that elevation. And I understand that maybe just the way that those are designed, there's no window there or anything to break that up, but it does look a little odd to me. You know, the variation in height is there. It's maybe, I certainly understand the rooftop access, but there might be something that could be done to help make that variation in height a little bit more interesting. That said, our regulations aren't terribly specific on what you have to do, so
Right.
I get that. But it's the south and the east elevations, the ones that most people are gonna see.
Well, and people that live back there behind them, they're gonna see it every day.
Right.
But if it meets our regulations, then there's not a whole lot we can do, I'm just saying.
Kind of in regards to the email that
Boots sent out.
that Boots sent out, I would kind of like to have that entered in to the record. I've known Boots for a long time. I have an immense amount of respect for her, so I'd kind of like to have her.
Well, on that point, is there
opinion
any
recorded.
objection to including that comment in the record, the email? None. We'll consider that part of the record.
I have a question for the applicant. Assumption is rooftop, you're butted up right against the river. I'm assuming you want to be able to have people go out and be able to look at that. And then it looks like there's a couple rail spurs behind the building, so there's really, I don't think anybody's going to see it from the north face. Would that be correct?
Right, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole purpose of the flat top roof is to provide an amenity to residents and guests.
I'm sorry, Dustin, would you mind coming to the podium? We just need to make sure we get your comments on the record.
That was my fault.
No, you're good. Dustin Baker, Alcove Development. Yeah, so, and I have Lance Adams here as well, the architect that can talk to some of the architectural features of the building and why it looks the way it looks. But the overarching theme, the first thing that we looked at when we were looking at this site was when I originally looked at the site, I was just going to put pitched roof, 2-car garage, typical DeSoto looking structures, okay? And I was going to run it, you know, where they would be facing east and west. So you drive in, you'd have a shared parking lot and call it a day. But I thought that after looking at the site and really, really thinking about what we wanted to do, to be completely different in DeSoto, and the word different means something here, to be different than anything else in DeSoto. That's why we spent a lot of time analyzing the positioning of the buildings, how the height of the buildings, looking at where it would be best for the residents to be able to look out over the railroad tracks to be able to have a really, really nice view. So that was the overarching theme, is the rooftop access and the flat roofs, really driving the architectural functionality of the buildings. Now, color scheme, I'll just tell you, we haven't, I wouldn't say that we're set on this color scheme. You know, there could be some variation of color. I certainly wouldn't stand here and say that I could make a commitment on the exact stonage on the building from a cost standpoint, but I do take Boots's comment. She called me, so we had a long conversation, and I do take her comments into consideration. I told her that. So what you see here is what we can at least commit to, and then we can look at improving on it via some of the outside facade selections. So, but I'm pretty proud with what we've tried to accomplish here, and and how much time and thought process the design team went into it. So
Well, you always do try hard to meet everybody's expectations.
we're trying.
And you, like I said, the rooftop is great, and getting the buildings in there and the access and the ADA, I think that's great. I just was a little surprised when I looked at the exterior, because that's just me. So, but apparently a couple of other people, so maybe if we could just add some color into it somewhere.
Yeah.
That might help,
Yeah.
but.
Well, yeah, and Dustin, I'm never one to oppose a river view. I think it's great. I think we should need to do more of that in this town.
Yeah.
I think the flat roof concept, there's no real problem I have with that either. But I do think that the parts of the facade, and in particular Building 1, if there was an opportunity to do something a little different to present that from the streetscape that wouldn't be quite so different, that might be helpful. And I don't know what that would be, if it's a variation of the roof, the parapet on that southern side, or maybe put something else to that. Something other than those blank walls. I don't know if there's a way that you could possibly work in something, an element, maybe not windows, but, you know, some kind of an
Right.
element to that, so that it presented, at least from the street, as not being an institutional use, but it kind of looks like that from the street. And it doesn't necessarily fit the character of the neighborhood. That said, we can only do so much. I think you've heard the comments.
Yep.
You know, hopefully you've been respectful of the way folks feel, and Lord knows Boots will talk, so you
Yeah.
probably ought to give some thought to that, because she's already talking.
Right.
So, you know, I think in the nature of trying to be a good neighbor, I would hope you do give that some consideration.
We will.
My concern really is secondary, actually, to me, the primary concern I have is the traffic flow and the parking on this site. So it is really interesting how this is built, but I'm worried that you're gonna have young kids that live here. And you may not intend that, and we can talk about all kinds of studies that talk about how young kids aren't going to apartments, but I think the way this town is being developed, we're gonna have a lot of kids living in apartments. And I'm a little worried about them getting across that east side and walking up that sidewalk, having to cross traffic to do it, because that's the entrance and exits to your parking. Did you consider whether there might be a way to give access along the west side instead of the east side for that sidewalk?
I think we did consider that, but I'd like to maybe call my engineer up to answer kind of a, Austin, you want to come up and kind of
I'm
speak to
assuming the
that?
school bus has got no business going in there. They're gonna pick kids up at the corner.
This is Austin Sitzman with Milburn Civil Engineering. So on the west side of the drive heading north is actually pretty steep, and we have retaining walls to make it so the grade actually, you know, is like doable going into the parking garages. So if you look on building 2, on the southeast corner there's a retaining wall coming out, kind of wrapping around the corner there.
Yeah.
And so it gets really steep, like on the east side of that retaining wall, it's pretty steep to get around there. So we just wouldn't be able to do a sidewalk on that side of the drive.
No, I was talking about actually on the west side of the property.
Oh, the complete west side. Oh.
To keep the kids away from having to dodge in and out of traffic.
So we also have, you know, pretty big grade change if you're heading, like right where this cursor is, and heading north, that all drops off pretty severely, so that alley will be actually higher than the grade in the parking lots. So there's just no way to get a sidewalk up to that alley and then through.
So the way your retaining walls work, if I'm pulling out of the driveway in building 3 and going to take a turn to the right to get out,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be looking at wall basically until I clear that.
Yes. Yep.
It just seems like a safety issue.
For
Especially for pedestrians is what I'm worried about. You know, 'cause that's the only way those people can get to that building if they're walking from 82nd Street, which I'm guessing that's where a school bus stop's gonna be.
So you're worried about them crossing the drive aisle and people driving along the drive aisle.
Well, you've got drivers coming into that area that are gonna be looking at basically a wall until they're out.
Commissioner, clarified point, so, because I think he's probably following about as well as I am at this point. You're saying that we're intentionally commingling foot traffic and car traffic, and that's a concern to you? Is that basically?
It's a concern with the sightlines and the
Yeah.
fact that we have these retaining walls and the cars are gonna be coming in and out of the garage. I mean, I just think it's, I don't know, maybe, it's just gonna be a straight sidewalk, right?
Right. So people pulling out of building 3, they should be able to, once they get around that corner, they'll be able to see where that sidewalk ends on the north end, where
Yeah,
they're
but
gonna be
that's-
crossing.
That's when kids are crossing there, right?
Right, that would be what people are crossing. There's,
Well,
they should be pulling out of there pretty slow.
Well, it should be.
Yeah. Parking garage. But,
But if you're saying
yeah,
that
the
we
west side
looked at
just-
alternatives and there really aren't any.
right.
Okay.
I mean, we could look at putting one on the west side of the drive aisle, but we would need stairs to go down, like right there where your cursor is. We need stairs down there. So,
I mean, the primary access to these buildings is on the north side, right?
yeah, yep.
So those kids coming up the sidewalk are gonna go around to the north side, so they're gonna cross over that driveway to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
Yep.
sidewalk on both sides.
I mean, I actually think that they're gonna be coming, they're gonna walk out into the parking lot on any of the buildings except for the southernmost building. They're gonna walk out into the parking lot and then be crossing, they're not gonna be crossing right where the car is turning out.
So you think they'll be coming out the south side of the building?
Yeah,
Okay. I just maybe didn't pick up from the elevation that was the likely place that people would be entering and leaving.
Yeah.
I guess I'm looking at the south elevation, so the bottom of the stairwells there, those are the doors that are, you probably use on
correct,
south elevations.
right.
How tall will these walls be?
The ones wrapping around the buildings will be like 4 feet. So, and then the ones on the west side are 5 to 6 feet tall.
Would you entertain a motion of putting like some speed bumps in to make sure that the traffic was moving slower?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how it's gonna work. I was curious as to whether there was an alternative to making foot traffic go in that same direction. That's really all I was
We looked
trying
at
to-
it, because I was thinking about that too. People are gonna have to cross the drive aisle, but it really just isn't an easy way to make it work. Easy alternative to make it work.
So in that north building, they're gonna come out of the south side of the building, go to the sidewalk next to the parking lot. And then they're gonna go out into the parking lot to get across the street.
Probably the only way they can get there, the way that's designed, because with the retaining walls, the way that they won't be able to get any other way, other than to go back across the sidewalk.
I mean,
Or walk out of the parking garage.
we could,
You could do that.
we could put a speed hump in there to at least get everybody's attention. That way they're gonna have to slow down right where the,
I think you'd wanna have something, and it may not be all that many kids that live there, but.
Right.
It's 7. How many do you wanna lose?
None.
Right, so, I mean, I think you might wanna give some thought to doing something for safety there to protect those pedestrians. The other thing I was thinking is maybe you run like a fence along that sidewalk so they can only come across at certain points, such as at the parking lots.
I don't like that
I
idea.
don't think I either, but I mean, I'm trying to think of some way you could keep them from
landscaping.
if they're kids like my kids, they're gonna walk down the middle of the street.
Well, if they're like me, if there's a fence there, I'd climb over it.
That's true. I personally would like to see you think a little bit about that element. The related question, I know we changed the parking requirements, so this fits the new parking requirements. Probably wouldn't have the old ones, right?
Probably not, because the old ones were a little bit more strict towards one-bedroom units.
Yeah.
And now it's just 1.5 per unit across the board.
So, I mean, I trust that we aren't gonna have overflow parking, that's not gonna be an issue here, but, I mean, if it's in accordance with our regs, that's the risk we took, we changed that, so.
Since you guys are bringing up the landscape plan, we may want to be a little bit cognizant of the sight lines there too, with that sidewalk. If you've got a big deciduous tree or an empress tree or whatever, anything that's large, you're gonna, because it looks like we've got a number of trees kind of on that line of the property line there too. We may want to, I don't know if we can adjust that or not.
Well, I'm just one voice, I mean, I don't know what you guys feel about the safety issue, if you,
No, it's certainly an important factor, but I'm not sure how to get around it with it.
yeah, I mean, the answer may be there's no other good way.
It's kind of a unique site.
Yeah.
It is. So, I think he's aware of it and would try to do everything he can to facilitate good safety issues through there. I don't know what else to do.
Any other questions for the applicant?
No, thank you guys.
Thank you. So this is not a public hearing, the matter's before the planning commission. Thoughts, suggestions? This is a site plan, so this will be, our approval is the last approval there will be on it.
That's right.
I'm not opposed to the project, I just have concerns with some of the safety and a little bit of the aesthetics of the building. As somebody who grew up and looked at the river every day for the first 18 years of my life, I appreciate the views off that. That's gonna be pretty amazing. And it's gonna take a lot of work to get those building out and the tanks out, and
Yeah.
I might have to go down there and watch while you're doing that. But I don't know. Just got kind of the safety concerns that were brought up.
Well, as this is the last approval for it, they won't be coming back to us. I mean, I guess you have an option, which would be to table it with specific requests and ask them to come back with addressing those issues. Or alternatively, deny it, you can do that, or approve it and just trust that they'll do what we need them to do, or what we suggested they do. I don't know what your feelings are about
I mean, Dustin, I think he's gonna try to do everything he can to make sure that issues that we brought up have been addressed. So I personally don't see any reason to delay it.
that. Okay.
And we've pretty much hashed it over and talked to them, and I don't know what improvements they could do to make it safer. So I'm in favor of proceeding.
Based on what he's done in town and for the length of time I've known him, I don't have a problem with trusting him that he will do it.
I think it looks pretty good. I don't have as big a safety concern as you guys have expressed. But I think they're making an effort to do what they can with the site and utilize it in the best way possible. I don't have any issues myself.
Your kids are better than my kids.
No, even if the sidewalk is in the right place, they're gonna go wherever they want to go.
I do agree with
So-
that.
So I think it's
I know exactly what I would have done as a kid.
trying to control them in the best manner possible.
That's all we can do.
Yeah, I would think we'd be lucky if my kids used the sidewalk and all. But one thing that kind of lessens my concern, I think you've got some very valid concerns. One thing I'm thinking of is nobody's gonna have time to get any speed up, you know, unless they're driving recklessly, but, you know, there's not a lot of space there to get moving. And that's kind of a little bit reassuring. I think it might not hurt for the real law abiders if maybe a crosswalk or something might, you know, help people start thinking about the kids at least if they're distracted that day. Would there be a city requirement for wheelchair ramps at any locations?
Yeah, they're actually on the site plan, they're pretty small, Commissioner, but yeah, there's 3 locations for handicap ramps. And they're basically adjacent to the, I think it's not item 10. I think it's actually, is it 15? Well, if you have some concerns on those specific locations, I mean, we certainly can work with the applicant on if they need to slide a little bit one way or the other.
Well, those seem to be appropriate locations for a crossing to me. Just not having much time to really look at it, but that would seem that
Be consistent
Maybe.
with access to the north front.
yeah, it might be good to have one at the end of the sidewalk on the board too.
So you don't force a pedestrian who's in a wheelchair to have to go down the roadway?
Well, yeah, that and, you know, if you're gonna put in some crosswalks, the wheelchair ramp's the place to have them. But other than that, I don't really feel qualified to comment too much on the appearance. I don't, when I first looked at it, I thought, well, this might be a real modern thing here that I know nothing about. 'Cause I know I've seen a lot of buildings that really struck me by how square and boxy they look. I think people must like that.
Is the two-story building the one on the farthest south? Or the farthest?
Yeah.
Just checking. One of them shows 5 inch rates. That sits down in a pretty good hole there. Anyway.
Yeah. It's a challenging property.
I don't have any issues.
Okay. Any further discussion? Someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve agenda item 7A, site plan for the Rio multifamily apartments as submitted.
I'll second.
Right. Thank you.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, roll call.
Maddock,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Huggins,
Yes.
Manson,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, we're trusting you.
I got this.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dustin.
We retrieved Commissioner Milburn. We move to item 7B, discuss renewal of the SUP for communications tower at 30825 West 90th Street.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we have here is a special use permit has been submitted. With a special use permit, I'd like to give the planning commission at least a meeting to sort of digest a special use permit because it is something that is typically out of the norm and as the definition of special use is something that is an item that we wouldn't normally consider under that typical zoning category as far as a permitted use. So there are several steps that the applicant has to go through. I did include the application materials, also our telecommunications special use permit criteria. There's some photos of the site and the previous ordinance, which was approved 10 years ago. So it was a 10-year special use permit, and here we are 10 years later. The photos of the location do show, and actually this is city-owned property. It's on the side of the water tower, the Waverly Water Tower. And we do have a lease that we do collect rent. It does seem to be a fairly generous for the city of DeSoto. The applicant has asked, as I understand it, to purchase the property from us, but have declined to do that and feel like the terms of the lease are a benefit to the city and just to leave it the way it is. And really, this is just more of information for the Planning Commission. If you've got any questions, comments, or concerns that you'd like to have us discuss with the applicant moving forward. Once again, this was approved initially in 2008 for a 5-year term and then in 2013 for a 10-year term. And so with that, I will just stand for any questions you might have. If you've got any specific questions about the lease terms, Patrick can answer those questions, and do feel comfortable moving forward with this special use permit application for our next meeting.
Fred, have we had any complaints or anything from anyone?
To my knowledge, no, we've not got any. Now, we haven't sent any letters out at this point.
But I mean, along the years, we've never had any complaints on anything.
No, we have not.
Has there been any updates to the regulations on their requirements to what they have to do?
Since I've been here, the answer is no, unless, Mike, you know of any kind of
As I
changes.
recall,
Has anything in the conditions changed on the approved ordinance?
No. No, they've followed the conditions that are outlined in that special use permit, and they have maintained and paid the terms of their leased property.
Really just semantics, but slide 77 says there's a Sprint antenna. I'm assuming that should just be changed.
Yeah, I'm not sure who the actual user is. Certainly Sprint has been gone for a little while, so we can get some clarification on that language.
I don't know.
To
if
the
it
actual
matters
end
much
user is
for
of
us, but
of the tower, correct. I understand.
Has the user indicated how long this tower is going to be viable, or if they expect new technology? Or how does
I've
it
not
work?
had any of those discussions with them. At this point, they're asking for another 10 years. So I assume that's at least what they're thinking.
And they're not proposing any structural changes to the tower. It's
No,
basically
no, not
just
at all.
continue
It's
to
just a
use the tower
renewal
they
of basically the existing terms.
I mean, I find it interesting, our regs talk about towers that exceed 150 feet, requiring it supported by an opinion of a telecommunications consultant hired by the city at the expense of the applicant as to the need of 150 feet. We've already done that, so I'm guessing we don't need to do that again.
That's my interpretation as well.
But obviously, this is in excess of the height that we normally would permit, with absent a showing of why it needs to be. I thought there was also something we had about, in the event that it falls, it needed to be on enough space that it could fall and be replaced. Do we not have that in this reg? Because I don't see that.
don't remember. I remember talking about setbacks being the tower height, and maybe I'm conflating pole sign regulations.
Yeah, maybe I am too. I was thinking there was something about concern that if it had fallen, we didn't want it to hit something else, and you had enough room to lay down a new one and put one up.
I don't remember if that was cell towers or.
I don't
pole
remember
sign.
that either.
Well, I do, that's why that structural analysis is in the application to show that they have gone out and tested to make sure it'll meet the conditions for wind speeds and all the structural requirements. So I don't know where that fall zone
What,
comes into play, but
I was thinking it was in connection with the one that they put on Daryl's property.
You sure it wasn't the VFW one?
Maybe it was.
Because that one on Daryl's predated me. It's perpetual.
I don't remember.
We're
Well,
going for
needless to say, our
VFW.
regs, I don't think we have anything that talks about that.
And that was the one, I don't know, we were thinking about changing regs.
we should
to
put
make
that in
sure
for
that
signs too, Commissioner.
Right. Right.
And then, we just don't have any space.
He hasn't been in on a pole sign discussion.
No.
Just wait.
It's not a joke.
There's nothing funny about any of that. So the request is for a 10-year.
yes.
So official submittal will happen next month.
Yes, or the public hearing would happen at the next meeting. They've actually applied, but I told them that our process is to have a introductory meeting for the planning commission before we move to the public hearing for a special use permit.
Okay, Brad, it's probably in here and I'm.
Is that on any?
see it.
Well,
Structural report.
Yeah.
by and large, we've done it that way. I mean, even like the batch plant, we had a meeting just to say, hey, this is coming.
Maybe this is what I'm thinking.
And just to get feedback from planning commission before but they went ahead and submitted their application anyway.
Okay,
But there-
thank you.
Under the general requirements, 3E, lowercase v, there is a language that says, in case the tower and related facilities shall be, in which case the tower and related facilities should be separated with adjacent property line equal to 1.5 the height of the tower structure.
Interesting.
So there was something about that. And that was if the adjacent property was zoned for commercial or industrial uses, that applies. That's interesting. I don't know why we made a distinction there. But I'm assuming they met all the requirements 10 years ago, so.
And the site is 65 by 65, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, as I recall, that 65 by 65 is just the leased area, so the city's property
Oh, okay.
is larger.
Good point.
Well, certainly our requirement would be that it's separated from adjacent property lines, but only if the property was, well, I guess it is except if it's zoned for commercial and industrial. So in this case, that would apply. At least 1.5 the height of the power structure from the adjacent property lines. I mean, whether you can bootstrap into the remainder of the city property if the lease property is only 65 by 65, I assume you probably can. The idea is that it doesn't fall on something.
Right.
What else do you need from us on this?
That's it. It's just, once again, informational and to get just some initial feedback so we can relay any of these concerns to the applicant.
It's not gonna fall on anything. Except the water tower.
Yeah, it might hit the water, it hit the water tower potentially.
Any other comments you'd like to share with staff on this? Seeing none, I believe that completes our agenda. Anything anybody else to talk about?
Yeah, what about the December planning commission meeting? That's on the Tuesday after Christmas. What, we thought that far in advance?
Well, I've not looked at that one, but we typically have to adjust the December meeting. And so we probably, in fact, we can put it on the next agenda just to fix that date.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Thinking
looking at
ahead.
vacation. I'll plan that.
Any other business?
Do we need to say anything about getting the R3 republished or whatever the process is for that?
Other than,
Yeah, well, so, no, I've got a note to check it out.
Okay.
We have a service, a third-party vendor service where Patrick sends them the ordinances that affect it, and they're supposed to keep that up to date, so.
well,
we'll
just don't pay them next month because they're apparently asleep at the switch.
So yeah, the ordinance is still in effect, it obviously didn't get posted to the website, so
Yeah.
we'll get that fixed.
I also would request that the existing zoning map be put back on the website. That's a very helpful document.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, we've got to get our consultant to help us with that. I've asked for PDFs and something we can post, and it just hasn't happened, so.
I didn't realize we'd taken it down. Was it just so out of date?
Yeah, it was quite out of date.
I'm gonna get in trouble, man.
Let's get modern. Anything else?
Any
Entertain a
updates
motion?
on the, oh, sorry.
Sorry,
I
go
wanted
ahead.
to ask an update on like Edgerton Road and that stuff. They have any updated timelines?
Yeah, we do. It was supposed to be closed last week to finish out, so Edgerton Road, to finish out the 95th Street intersection and up to tie into where the interchange is there at K10. Supposed to be closed last week. There's a utility conflict, so they've delayed that closure. I know you want that closure because that'll close the K10 bypass.
Yeah, stop it.
So once they
No,
do.
I'm just curious because it seems like it's just ongoing.
It is, yeah, it is. So, the last word I heard that it will be next week, hopefully, but we're gonna keep that up to date on our social media.
What about on the south end, the tie-in down there, on the road down there? That's still-
Yeah, so I'd have to look at the schedule, but they need to construct that roundabout. So that's Clarkson's project, and I don't think that's until phase 2, which doesn't occur till summer.
And I've got utility conflicts there with AT&T,
On the south end.
yeah, on that segment that goes west to Edgerton to get
Right.
the road all the way there
It's
to
gonna take a while.
It's gonna be a while.
Yeah.
But the
Just close
important
down,
thing is
just
to
close down.
close
Edgerton
that-
right there.
close down the 95th Street so people can't
And
duck
then
off
take your
K10
time,
and, use it as a bypass. Myself
Build
included.
your own.
Maybe we just fix the bridge and not worry about it.
Yeah.
Speaking of bridges, where are we with the bridge on 83rd Street down there by the,
We're still working through some details with KDOT and the railroad and clearance on that. We're waiting for an administrative determination from KDOT.
whether they gotta raise it or lower it? or-
Yeah, it's next year's project regardless.
Administrative, you know that means. No time.
All right, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thanks for coming.
Aye.
Well, that's funny, because I
calling booze?
This conference is no longer being recorded.
I sent the email, and lo and behold, they had a meeting tomorrow. Okay, I don't know if you did it. But yeah, looking into that, the appeals for corporation commission, not just some attorney at KDOT, so I don't mind going.
Anything's excellent.
I was gonna say, you know anything about the Danny Lane guy, don't you?
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
But there's a Turk person and then a lady that came to visit me the other day, I forget her name. And then Kevin, obviously, who's been, I think he was in my neighborhood.
When I came up here for the Evergy meeting the other night, there was a gentleman that's associated with.
Just like the fact that
Fairview
it's
Baptist
not
Church.
partisan.
And he said he's